Go. Good afternoon. Apologies for the late start. Welcome to this civil society report back meeting, which is long overdue.
No, do you know what my friend said? I was doing it.
As some of our colleagues join us, we are going to start so that we don't waste any more of your time. The purpose of this meeting is to report back on what transpired after some of you voted for us to be part of the civil society representatives in the Presidential Summit Planning Committee. Today, it's the first anniversary of the second summit of the GBVF, and it's also the fifth anniversary of the first presidential summit on GBVF, the 1st of November. The people who are joining me here, there will be more of us, are the people who were elected to represent civil society in the Presidential Summit Planning Committee. We have brought ourselves here to have this conversation and to answer the questions that you may have about our engagement and where we are in the process at the moment. My name is Sibongi Lendashe. I was the civil society co-chair. And
yeah, you're going.
Yeah, on the right is Kayan Yoon, who was the alternate co-chair. Yes, and on my right is Vanit, who was also there. But people will introduce themselves as and when. The person who is just joining us was also on the PSPC, Advocate Brenda Matunise. So we are waiting for 2 more people, members of the PSPC, representing civil society. There were other sectors that were represented, like labor, but we did not really engage with them a lot in the PSPC. I think they organized themselves. And there was the higher education, I think, sector that was also represented. And we also had very limited engagement, with them. The other person that we are waiting for, I don't know if she is online, Dr. Shaida Omar. She's online, yeah, representing the children's sector. So these are the people who are here from the PSPC. One, I said at the beginning that this is long overdue, and for that, we would like to offer our apologies. We kept on postponing this meeting for a number of reasons that will become clearer as the meeting progresses. I am going to start by telling you the story of what happened after May, June of 2022, when you elected us into this planning committee. I'm just going to summarize it and take us all the way to the summit and what came out of the summit and the work that we did afterwards. And we will proceed where Advocate Matunise is going to talk about the processes of the plans that came out of the summit and the end of our honeymoon with government. And Candace Zudik, who's also online, also was part of the PSPC, so we are actually 7, is going to talk about one major example, the thing that government kind of consistently said was the thing that we actually wanted to have. We agreed to be on the PSPC, even though we had a lot of doubts and skepticism. In fact, some of you remember I did write an op-ed trying to explain why, even in this prevailing context of summit fatigue, civil society had once again agreed to be part of another presidential summit. There were things that were interesting, even though we had these doubts. November of 2022 was the quarter mark of the National Strategic Plan. The National Strategic Plan came into operation in April of 2020. And we understood that a number of people did not know about the NSP or had limited information because it came in right at the beginning of COVID. So we did, as various civil society formations, have webinars to popularize the NSP. And government also did its part. So when they came to us around April of 2022, 2 years later, and said, we know that we haven't done what we're supposed to do. We are only left with 8 years of the National Strategic Plan. We want to create a space where we can account for what we have done, amplify the good work that has been done or is being done, to respond, and also to accelerate. That was the theme of the second presidential summit. And we said to ourselves that this is something that we can get. We went in there very clear that we know that even with the best of intentions, government plans do not always work out the way that we hope that they will do. And that we were here for a purpose. And if that purpose does not exist anymore, we would not be there. Because for us, was these three things that were the theme of the summit. It was to ensure that these three things that were the themes of the summit would actually go on and be actualized. The way in which we work after we elected us around June, because we had the civil society elections, and then we went in there to begin the work. We had meetings mostly on Friday mornings from 9 to 11. There were 3 working groups, other members of civil society who were not part of the planning committee joined this, so we also had elections. So civil society was represented at the planning committee, the PSPC, us who are here, with Dr. Shahida and Candice who are online. And then we also had the 3 working groups. The first working group focused on the program design. The second one was on logistics, and the third one was on communication. Each working group had a civil society representative as co-chair or coordinator, I don't remember the actual titles, and then and a government representatives. So just like in the PSPC, there were very clear terms of reference around what each of these 3 working groups was supposed to do. We spent a lot of time, and by the time we got to the summit, we were quite happy about the agenda that we had co-created with government. We didn't always agree, but at the end, it was a product that we were happy to own and say that this is what we want to go and do at the summit. Some things went very well at the summit and some things did not go very well at the summit. But before we got to the summit, as civil society, for those who were at the summit, you will remember We spent a lot of time doing online consultations. We were on what was then known as Twitter. We had all of these kind of consultations saying, what are the things that you want to see fast-tracked, amplified, and accelerated at the summit? There were other consultations. Some of the PSPC members attended these in various provinces to try and feed into the national summits. These happened with varying kind of levels of success. Some of them were very poorly organized, planned, rushed. And some of the people, in fact, in some of them, there were people who did not have any information about the national strategic plan, but there were others where there was information that was provided that really helped the program design to make decisions about what it is that needed to happen. Going into the summit, there were three things, ways or spaces that we created. We had the commissions, we had the caucuses, and all of them were supposed to do specific things. There were areas of overlap in some of them, but they were created, the other ones were the focus groups, like the thematic areas. But the idea was to answer these three questions. Our levels of accountability, what we need to amplify, and what needs to be accelerated. We developed documents going into the summit as civil society, which we shared with civil society in order to help those who were there but did not have information on what it is that we wanted to push on. In all the 6 pillars of the National Strategic Plan, the idea was that we would go and meet with all of the senior government officials, because government did try to bring in people from DSD, Justice, Department of Women, Treasury, and all other kind of government institutions that were capable of giving us the answers that we needed. There was an unevenness in some of how we engaged in these spaces, because in some of them, we also had people who didn't have enough information about what was happening under the various pillars of the NSP. So when we came out of the summit, we came out with some pillars that had very clear kind of outcomes in terms of what we wanted to do. But there were 2 processes that emerged after the summit. One was that because we wanted to accelerate, we knew that we had lost 2.5 years of the NSP. We agreed to 2 processes. One was a 6-month fast track, so things that needed to be done within 6 months. And the other one was 2 years. And for the 2-year process, government was going to integrate this in their annual performance kind of plans. And there was going to be clarity in terms of how this was going to happen. When we came out of the summit, civil society went to fine-tune the asks or what was coming out of this. So we didn't stop at the summit. We went on to work for about 2 weeks. And on the 27th of November, the summit was on the 1st and 2nd of November. So we worked for a month on weekends, and we made submissions again, saying these are the things that came out of the various caucuses, commissions, and focus groups. So this is what civil society is saying. These were the resolutions of the summit. And part of this was a document that was circulated, and people were asked to make input on some of the things that they feel were said but were missing. There were things that we didn't agree that these would be the things because they were new asks, things that were not necessarily in the National Strategic Plan and all of that. But I want to briefly kind of go through the thing that we had agreed as what we needed to fast track within the 6 months. There was a conversation about when the 6 months would start. You know, we knew that with government and mostly ANC people, December was a no-go because there was Nazareth. So the meetings stopped and all of that, and we agreed to reconvene in January of 2023. So the agreement being that by March, we would then start the 6-month process, the fast track of the plan. We went through the 6 pillars, and here I will just briefly go through what we said needed to be fast tracked within the 6 months so that we can get back on the 10-year plan of the National Strategic Plan. Pillar 1, if you all remember, it's about accountability, coordination, and leadership of the response. We wanted clarity around composition of the council because there were things that were in the NSP that were not clear. So, for example, we know that they are 15, and then there's a split, 51% and 49% between government and the very same NSP talks about 4 stakeholders, the corporate sector and the development partners. And part of this was just to clarify where do they sit, you know, do they get government seats, do they get civil society seats, and what is the composition of the council? The resourcing became an issue because it was a conversation going into the council. We know that these, the funding, it comes from the departments, but could we just have clarity on how much is allocated for the response, whether it's justice, GBVF, and all of that, so that we have a sense of how much it is that this government actually used to respond. The question of the fund was a big thing that was coming in this process because the bill that was proposed, or the minister at the summit said that there was a bill, the National Council on GBVF. We had a lot of questions about the draft bill and the content. If you remember, we saw this bill in 2021 and it went AWOL for about a year and then surfaced about a week or a few days before the NSP. And then when we got to the summit, the Minister of Justice said, this is what we have done. So one of the things that we had advocated for was the fund to be created inside this legislative framework, and it was not there. We also were concerned that this was legislation that focused on national competence, but they didn't really set out obligations for provinces and municipalities. And all of these things were things that are part of the institutional framework that is set out in the NSP, but did not find their way into this legislation. So we wanted these things to be legislated for so that we do not continue to be in this state of having to negotiate with government on whether there is a fund and how it is going to be resourced, and also what it is that provinces and premiers needed to do, and also what municipalities needed to do. This obviously opened a new conversation around this bill that was already in Parliament, which had been tagged as a bill that only needed to be in the National Assembly because it didn't really have provincial competence. And we were saying with this ask that came from the summit, this bill will have to be withdrawn so that it is tagged correctly as a Section 76 bill that now needs to go to the National Council of Provinces. So these were some of the things around Pillar 1. what does it mean to have a coordinated, response where there is accountability as set out in the NSP. Of course, there may be different opinions about this, but this need to hold or to coordinate the response was not a very new thing. This is something that came from the 24 demands, because if you read the 24 demands properly, we are saying we have had a number of national strategic plans. So what we need to do differently is to hold the coordination, the things that keep on frustrating the implementation of this national strategic plan. And we were quite clear then in the 24 demands and all the way to the NSP. This is the kind of leadership that we want to lead the response. This is the expertise, the skills, and even the temperament of the people who were that specific about what it means to lead this response. Fine. Over the next few months, there would be conversations with government, and some of them very disturbing, because even though we had started at the summit, we knew what we wanted to achieve. Government's response in many public spaces was simply that if we want to do anything to this legislation, their hands were tied. So we would have to go to Parliament, just like everyone else, as if the summit never happened. So what we agreed to as things that we needed to accelerate, and so that we fast track this process, when it came to it, we had this ongoing conversation with government, but they were saying they are not going to do that. So, of course, we knew that if this was an issue of political will, because if government wanted to change what was inside the legislation, they would do it. Many government departments do that. All that you need is the person who put the legislation before Parliament. If they feel that there are changes that needs to be made, they can do it. So this playing like this helplessness that there's nothing that we can do was a demonstration of the lack of political will. And we should have been able to see that we are not moving together, that after these big summits that cost millions of rands, that we were now having conversations like the summit never happened. We proceeded to Pillar 2. And when we're talking about Pillar 2, what we wanted to see there were, I'm going to come back to Pillar 2, actually. I'm just going to go to Pillar 3 now. The protection, safety, and justice issue. There was the question around the decriminalization of sex work. That also came from the beginning, right, when we had the first presidential summit. There was a pilot that we needed to design to establish a functioning blueprint for SAPS. The regulations for the 3 pieces of legislation that government was working on: the Domestic Violence Act, the Sexual Offences Act, and the Criminal and Related Matters Act. There were also things around the Tutuzela care centers, around ownership of those centers and who had the responsibility for resourcing and all the administration for that. And we also talked about DNA kind of capability. These are the things that we had agreed to at the summit as things that were going to require fast tracking within the 6 months. That was supposed to have started in March. And now we do everything at the end of that 6 months. We looked at the response care support and response care support and healing, the minimum bucket of services that need to be provided to victims of violence, and also this conversion of buildings from public work for use as shelters. Under the economic power we were looking at ILO, services required for employers, redesigning and fast-tracking implementation of online maintenance system, and placing an emphasis on investigating alternative methods of enforcing maintenance orders, and fast-tracking the identification of the causes of backlogs and challenges within the system. And we also have these work streams under Pillar 6, which focuses on research and information systems. We talked about fast-tracking the framework to establish and confirm interventions to be peer-reviewed, and also fast-track gender-responsive budgeting. We talked about the identification of priority research topics, because that was one of the things that really came out very strongly during all of these spaces, the caucuses, the commissions, and the focus on research. What is it that, what are we researching? You know, what is the need? Because this pillar 6 that talks about research said the interventions that we put in place must be based on evidence. So what is the link between the research that we undertaken and what we need evidence, for? So are we doing research because there's money for doing research, or are we doing research because it's actually helping us, to do something that then takes the response forward? So these were the things that we gave and said we would like to see happen in this response. Of course, we know much was then, and if you can count, when is the 6 months ending or when it ended. So, fast track, the lifespan of this PSPC was supposed to be around end February, early March. And there was a change. Our sense was that Department of Women wanted the PSPC gone. And there was a tension between because presidency wanted the PSPC to stay, but they also wanted the PSPC to do more than what the PSPC wanted to do, was therefore, which is something that we had said as civil society we do not want to do. We don't agree with Department of Women about disbanding us, because a lot of the things that needed to be fast-tracked, accelerated, and amplified had still not happened. By that time, we still did not have the support for the summit. And so, to treat us like event planners, because that's what they were actually choosing us to do, that you came here, you planned the summit happened, thank you for the services, you can go now. But whether we stayed was outside of our powers. The ministers changed, and the conversation was that they would see if the new minister makes a decision that we stay on, but that was not to be. And so it was that we were unceremoniously disbanded with all of this work that was still hanging, in air, without the report, without any kind of way forward on what happens after the summit, the things that we were called them, that we were all asked to come to Madrid to do. So I'm going to stop there, and then Brenda, you can proceed, because you had the power to stay on and see what could be salvaged from the ruins.
Thanks, Co-Chair. So the tone has been set. So by February, March, we knew that we were not wanted, right? Despite our forcefulness in trying to get government to appreciate the urgency around addressing gender-based violence and femicide in total, right? And we've just been met with an attitude that really, as we conclude this meeting, we need to discuss how we're going to attend to all of that. So we are out, but we are there as we trying to work with government. There are two things that were requested from us: the terms of reference, the revised terms of reference, because we then felt we can salvage this by doing more as the PSPC. When Sbongile says they thought that we event management, we wanted to change that and design new terms of reference just to be able to monitor the fast track resolutions. That's what is important for us, right? We've got 6 months, let's do this. The second one was that we then looked at this and said, maybe we should propose that we declare gender-based violence and femicide as a national disaster. So we prepare that work. We make a submission to the Department of Women. We give it to them to say, please consider this. And when change of minister happened, I think our co-chair and the coach of government met with that minister, correct?
No, it never happened.
It never happened. Okay. So they had a conversation, I guess. So to take those two forward. So you leave us in the ledge with these two things. No decency to come back to us to say, we understand the approach that you wish to take. We agree with you or don't agree. You decide that we don't want this PSPC any longer. So we are out in the cold. However, around April 17th, we get an approach from the presidency because now there is a crisis around the report itself. Now we are 6 months down the line, there is no report for this summit, right? We are now 1 year, today, 1st of November, there's still no report of the summit. The 17th of April, they request that civil society give 3 names to assist with finalization of this report. Our understanding was that the work had already started in December. Somehow between December, January, February, March, things were not working well. So we had to step in as civil society. It was myself, Nonhle Skosana, and Candice Ludik, who then had to meet and decide how do we salvage this report and make sure that we have a final document at some point. We slog between April and June. By the 30th of June, we had finalized the report. That was then given to presidency and in turn, I guess, to the Department of Women. So from our side, the civil society, we delivered the report that should be available to all of us as we speak today. And our understanding was that the month of July was allocated for them to proofread. And I know that our co-chair was being asked to give a what do you call it? The forward as the co-chair, but also to proofread the document, right? So by July, this report was done, right? But now we are in November, you still don't have the report. And as I said, so where we are at the moment is that we have no clue on our submission on the new terms of reference so that we continue this work to monitor the fast track resolutions. But I mean, we're out of time. Remember, this was supposed to be 6 months. That is completely gone, right? So there's no one monitoring whether these resolutions are being implemented or not, right? I mean, it's at an individual organizational level at the moment where either people would engage, but there is no coordinated approach towards these resolutions coming out of the summit. The second thing is around the declaration of GBV as a national disaster. Still, there is no communication on whether they accept our rationale and the need for such to happen, or that we're talking nonsense, right? So there's no communication. What then happened in September this year is that the PSPC members received a an invitation to go into a meeting with the Department of Women, I think, and Presidency. And we've got a WhatsApp group. We all kept on asking, what is the point? What is the purpose of this meeting with the Department of Women, which was meant to take place on the 11th of September, 2023. However, it was postponed to a later date, which happened Monday. So what was the date in September? I think it happened in September towards the end. Towards the end, towards the end. But I mean, by the time we joined into that meeting, it had turned into some mood of some sort. It just disintegrated, right? And as we speak, we don't know whether a meeting will be called again for us to engage with government on what we had proposed, or there is a new format that they wish to engage with civil society with. So that's why we are with the summit report. Is still outstanding. We still have these two other outstanding issues around whether you have a PSPC in a different with different instructions and mandates, and the declaration of GBV as a national disaster. Thank you.
Candice, over to you. Candice was with the NSP-GBVF collective, and one of the things that we kept on hearing in these meetings was how the NSP-GBVF collective was now put forward as an alternative, to the council. So, well, you don't have the council, but you have the NSP-GBVF collective. And we were saying, the NSP-GBVF does not have the powers, that the council is supposed to have. So, Candice, if you can just come in and just talk to us about how the NSP-GBVF collective kind of work.
Unmute yourself, Candice. 2023, come on,
Okay, sorry, it wouldn't allow me to unmute myself, but I think I'm unmuted now, right?
Yes.
Okay, so, wow, just listening to everything again is kind of heartbreaking, right? So the NSP-GBVF collective came into being. It actually started out being called the NSP-GBVF Multi-Sectoral Implementation Collaborative. Early on in 2020, there was a disagreement, and a lot of civil society decided not to participate in that process. However, there were some civil society people still participating, and some of us chose to continue participating, basically because we were between a rock and a hard place. At that time, most of us, as I recall, went into it thinking that this was going to be a short-term, kind of like standing in the gap while we waited for the council legislation to come into play. The issue of the council was often on the agenda in meetings. I know I raised it a lot, right? And it was often discussed, and pretty much the response from government, as Sibongile has said, was that their hands are tied, their processes that it needs to go through, etc., etc. So, sorry, I just need to kind of remember everything that happened. There was a lot that happened. There was a time where the NSP-GBVF collective was really promising, where government representatives who did actually have some level of authority were present in the room, and they were engaging in meaningful discourse with civil society and actually hearing what was being said. That being said, that was quite early on in the process, right? As time wore on, what eventually started happening is that there were indeed government representatives in the room, but very often they didn't really have any sort of decision-making authority. So while we were having engagements, it was not necessarily leading to much. As you all know, I fully bought in to this idea that we have to work together, primarily because that was what the 24 demands demanded, was this multi-sectoral approach. So I kind of felt like we have to at least try, right? So going in there, you have no choice but to go in good faith, okay? You can't enter into collaboration and cooperation with doubts and mistrust. So we put those doubts and mistrust aside and we proceeded to work together. It's so complex and so difficult to even articulate everything that happened, because when we speak of government, right, it's an entity, it's a system. However, they're individuals working within that system who are legitimately doing their best. And when you're in an environment where you are working with people apparently or seemingly toward the same goal, one kind of becomes soft in a way. And what also tends to happen is that people will defend their positions and almost like associate with being part of this institution. But in reality, the reason why the NSP came into being is because the systems that we have in place are not adequate and they are not working. And that is obvious because when we marched in 2018, there were 5 of us being killed every day by a man who claims to love us. Today, there are 11 of us every single day. So clearly, whatever has been done has not been working, okay? And the major reason for this, if I look back, is the council issue, because the reality is that you can't implement anything without money, okay? With no budget, you are severely curtailed in what is possible. So I think that's pretty much the crux of it. So after we were disbanded, well, let's go back to the beginning of the year. So we continued participating, or I continued, let me not make it we, let me just speak for myself, because obviously I made the decision to continue participating, thinking that it was still salvageable, right? That somehow miraculously, if we just continued, that we would be able to turn this thing around. Obviously, I'm not the only one who thought that. As you all know, I was serving as the communications person, right? So I apologize if I inadvertently misled people when I didn't see what was happening yet. Okay, so once I saw what was happening, it became more and more difficult to participate in the spirit of goodwill, because it was becoming more and more clear that the very legislation we needed in order for this implementation to be successful and effective was not coming through. And it started becoming clear that we were running the risk of actually making the problem worse, not better. I can speak particularly from a communication perspective, right? We've been advocating for 365 days of action. We've been advocating for consistent, clear messaging. Okay, it is impossible to do that without a budget. Okay, there's no way that one can generate messaging that is appropriate in 11 languages for all the various cultural contexts we have in South Africa without some sort of funding to pay the people to do the work, right? That is the reality. So it started feeling very much like we were replicating patriarchy in our very actions, right? Because here we are basically in an abusive relationship with the state. They keep promising that things are going to change, and we keep participating and nothing changes, right? So, a long story short, without a council, without the decriminalization of sex work, like, where does that actually leave us, right? Because the NSP is really, really clear about the council, And if 3 years into it, we still don't have that, what are we actually doing? I think I'm going to stop there because I feel like I'm going all over the show, but obviously I am happy to answer any specific questions that people may have. Is that okay? Spungile, if you're speaking, I can't hear you.
Thank you, Candice, for sharing
I'm
that.
going to keep quiet, yeah? Thank you.
Yes. So this is our version of what happened after we were elected to serve on the PSPC. This is what we wanted to come back today and say with your votes, with the trust that you gave to us. This is the work that we tried to do, and obviously we failed. And we also offer our apology that we should have come back earlier, sooner, you know, to say that the things that you sent us to do is actually not happening. And we kept on hoping. So the final thing, I guess, it's that as a PSPC, as you see us here, we obviously not of the same mind about what the future is. What we know is that beginning of March, we were disbanded. So in all of these interactions that we had, you know, with government, because sometimes they would call us, one of the things was, we are from civil society, but we are not necessarily representing civil society because the represented, you know, like the group, which was the PSPC that we were elected, is no longer effective, you know. And if they do decide to call us back or to have another way of engaging with civil society, there are some of us who are not, for example, me, not going to ever be available for this kind of engagement, you know, with government. But there are other people who are still going to be able, you know, to serve. So I think that's also something that's just clear, that the PSPC ended when it ended, but with various degrees, I think, of generosity, goodwill, trust, we keep on kind of engaging in different, you know, ways as people who sometimes you get a call from the presidency. One of the hardest things I think has been, there is this report, there is an obligation for a report to come out, but I'm no longer civil society chair because it was disbanded. So what am I doing, you know, with this report? I have had to engage with the report. So the report was done. I did put my signature on the report and insisted on a passage, you know, that from March, like a paragraph, that from March, it was no longer a PSPC. So whatever the delay is, whenever they decide to release it, it's we were no longer part of the process, you know, of the PSPC. And this report, writing as the PSPC, but we acknowledge that members of civil society were called in kind of individually from time to time, and those who could continue to assist the process because they wanted to see the outcome. We're happy to take on questions. Auntie Pat, is that you?
Hello.
Hello. Yes,
Hello.
please. Yes.
Yes, yeah. First of all, my apology, comrades, for not being so active and being in the loop. It has been a very, very busy year for us in my union and in the labor movement nationally and internationally. But I just wanted to also just give some of my views on firstly, it's on the issue about the coordination after the summit, even before the summit, after the summit now. From my side, I haven't received any reports from this committee, whatever the acronym is, you know, as being part of a collective. I think I agree with the fact that there's no coordinated response, there's no coordinated approach to how we implement the NSP. Now we have the pillar meetings, which happens I think every second week, which updates are given at every pillar. Now, as I've been out of the loop, I don't know if the pillars are actually discussing the implementation of the summit resolutions in terms of implementation. Then you also got this monthly collaborators, whatever network or collaborators meet collective. And one is not also sure if the implementation is being discussed there. So there's no harmony between the different ways in which we are connecting with each other. So I think that a coordinated approach to the implementation of the NSP, we really need to look hard at how we're doing it. Whether we should have all these other structures also in place and to whom they report, and we also don't get, at the end of the day, we also don't get reports. Now, on the council itself, comrades, I agree with the historical outline of how the council was introduced. And if comrades can remember, it was going to be some sort of committee or a commission or something, I just can't remember. But we objected to that. As Labour, we even met with the then Minister of Women to discuss with her our objections to the way that the bill, the council was going to be structured. Now the bill was eventually negotiated at NEDLAC, and there were a number of loopholes within the bill itself, which we obviously also tried to correct. The one was that they never captured business as a constituency, and government proposed that civil society actually gave up one of the seats to business, and we said no way can we reduce the numbers because there's only a certain I think it's 13 people there. So anyway, so we are still waiting on the bill actually to go through, because there are a number of problems with the bill itself that we need to discuss as well, how better we can form the council, get the funding, accountability, report backs, and so on. So I think it would be crucial for us to discuss the bill, the council, and also the mechanics of how the council is going to work, and who's also going to sit on the council, comrades. Then around the research, comrades, I think there is also need for independent research, because we cannot always rely on government to provide us with what the numbers. As Comrade Candy said, now the numbers have risen to 11 women being killed per day, and that is not reflected in the reports that one receives from SAPS, from the Minister of Justice, and so on. So I think there is a need for funding for independent research, so that we can counter what is being presented by government, who may be down to downplay the number of women that are being killed, raped, etc., and so on. And I also wanted just to apologize, to say my heartfelt, not condolences. I'm sorry, Comrade Candy, for what you have to go through. I know the feeling, your heart is there. You go out in goodwill and trust and faith, and then you feel that what you're doing is not, not bearing any fruits, etc., and so on. But there's something that I also wanted us as a collective of civil society collective to understand, and also to be cautious about the institutionalization of civil society into government structures. That is a very, very dangerous thing, comrades. We will not have our independent voice if we become part of all these government structures. And that we need to be very cautious of, comrades. And that's why I'm sitting on this collective, because we've got our own independent voice to counter all the other voices that are out there that are not assisting the women in this country. So, comrades, that would really be my input on this. Yeah. Also, I haven't seen the report from the summit itself. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, comrades, for giving me the opportunity to speak. And my apologies once again for not participating as I would like to.
Thank you for your contributions. We've got another hand. I think it's Katekani. Please be brief so that we can hear many people. We've got until 2:30, and we would like to, if you can just focus your interventions on the process. We are still going to talk about the substance, I think, of these themes. But today we want to focus on this process that we were all a part of and how it ended, just to clarify that, so that when we decide how we move forward, at least we move with clarity about what worked and what did not work in this process. Questions and comments, focus on those kind of things would help us to make a decision at the end of this about how we move on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Comrades, good day. My name is Tabang Leshabana. I am from Katekani Community Project in Tshwane. Comrades, since the second summit, I can say there has been so little in terms of the implementation of the NSP. And when I try to follow the pillars of the NSP, okay, before I talk about that, we as an organization, Katekani Community Project, we are implementing 3 pillars. It's pillar 2, 3, and 4. However, there's few organizations, civil society organizations or individuals that are implementing pillar 3 on board. And that is a concern because remember that the people that we want to serve in the community, the community members that are victims of various circumstances, including gender-based violence, needs us to represent them in court. And as pillar 3 as far as Pillar 3 is concerned, I think we need comrades to move away from going to court and chanting outside court, because most of the time when we do such, the voices become null and void, because the magistrate does not hear us when we chant outside. We need more people on Pillar 3 so that we can draft a relevant legal document that will influence the decisions of the magistrate when we support the victims of various circumstances, including the victims of gender-based violence and the domestic violence. So mine is to say, comrades, how best can we get this house to be recognized by those that have got muscles to fund these pillars or the implementation of this strategic plan? Because it cannot be that the president says that gender-based violence is the second pandemic, but when it comes to resources, even his office is quiet. Department of Women, they are quiet. Department of Community Safety, they are quiet. Everyone is quiet except for us on the ground, the civil society organizations, with no muscles to even pull a string. We need them on board, and those that we have elected or nominated to actually represent us in those national meetings, can they please come back with feedback to say, we have tried to knock at so and so a door and then we have hit the hard rock. How can we best get into that house so that we can advise further? Comrades, mine is that myself, I am the national coordinator on the paralegal, community-based paralegals. And we are fighting day and night to be recognized by government and to be regulated as legal practitioners, because the LSP does not recognize us. And we are on the ground.
Sorry to come in. Do you have a comment or kind of question about the process of the presidential summit and the aftermath that we're talking about today?
I believe I was on that, because all these things speak to that, to say what went wrong. How can we best assist?
Okay, thank you. When we were sitting here, I don't see a hand. Yesterday, actually, there's a recent development. This bill came up again in Parliament. And on this question of whether it needs to be tagged as Section 75, which deals with areas of national competence, National Assembly, and also Section 76, which then has provincial competence. The thing that I mentioned earlier about this question of insisting on keeping it tagged as a Section 75 bill came up yesterday, and I don't know if Kayan were able to actually just talk about how that's unfolded in Parliament. And I think when you hear about this conversation, you will then be able to see the extent of the, I don't think if there's a nice English word. It's misleading, it's dishonesty, that has actually gone now to the senior, the state law advisor, actually, because of how they are presenting the tagging of the bill. So, Kayan, what was the conversation yesterday?
Sorry, I didn't attend the conversation, but I just read up that it was the National Assembly passed, has sent it to the National Council of Provinces for concurrence.
Yes, so just it's going to be passed before the end of November.
But it is still
So
tagged.
it is tagged at 75, meaning, and they've given justification why it should be tagged at 75. So they've quoted two case laws, totally irrelevant, but and they've missed the point around how we have framed the NSP, right? How this multisectoral, this coordination that must happen from national, province, and is completely lost, right? So we need to decide that with the bill that is just about to be passed, right? That the president must assent to end of this month. What are we going to do? Because it literally takes away what we have been fighting for, right? This coordination, because we're not going to make it. It's going to be another work that stays there at national and not trickle down to the provinces and deal with this coordination that we talk about, because the silo mentality is going to continue, right? That's where we are.
So they go to the state law advisor with the wrong question.
Exactly.
Because at the summit, we said you have left out municipalities and provinces, right? So you need to include provinces, which then trigger the Section 76 tagging.
Yeah.
They don't include provinces in this revised bill, this area of provincial competence. So it doesn't really have to go to the province as required by Section 76, but they refer it to the NCOP. Just look at it, you know, but not under Section 76.
Yeah.
So the state law advisor gives a legal opinion, uses all of this irrelevant case law, but it doesn't answer the question that came from the summit on you need to put provinces here, give them obligations, you know, under the bill. Provinces are still not included, and that's why they haven't taken the Section 76, you know, legislation. It's not that we're crazy, we're not asking for Section 76. We're saying it needs to be Section 76 because you need to include. So the things that need to be fast-tracked, the things that came from the summit are still not in this legislation that they are trying to push through so that it actually, before Parliament dissolves, you know, for them to go prepare for the elections, they want to pass a hollow and empty legislation so that they can tick a box and say they have. And then when it comes to implementation, we are going to sit with this council that doesn't have powers, that cannot coordinate, that cannot do the things that are in the NSP.
And then just to add on that, sorry, okay, but also just to, one of the institutions that really let us down, and I think we need to reflect on that, is the portfolio committee on women, right? Remember, they held hearings on this bill, you recall. But their conduct, even during that process, was atrocious, because they did not even complete the list of people who were supposed to make their oral submissions. They just left people hanging, and no one had the decency to come back and say, you will be called again in a week or two. But I mean, we really have to tackle this disrespect that is given to us at all times. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Simone, I think there are comments from the chat. So if there's anything there, like a comment and questions.
Well, I haven't seen any question except comments, yeah. But there hasn't been a question for any of the speakers. Candice did have something that she wanted to say, and she's back now.
Okay.
Candice, I'm gonna ask you to unmute.
Simonia, can you hear me?
We can.
And everyone, obviously. Okay, so sorry, everyone, I got a little bit emotional and I didn't actually make a very important point that I would just like to bring in. And that is the fact that in the NSP, right, we identified patriarchy as the structural driver. We identified patriarchy as the issue, and we went about attempting to address that, right? Because gender-based violence currently seems to be moving towards being framed as some kind of interpersonal issue, whereas in reality, it is a structural issue. So the concern is that when there are people who don't understand the NSP and the underlying philosophy, trying to implement it, everything is being implemented through a patriarchal lens. And that is causing more harm than good. Thank you.
Yes, please. Yeah, President, no. You tell us who you are. Okay. Village Monday. I've been following you guys without being in civil society. I'm a 7-year Adventist. We have a department where we call it Edit Now. And based on the things that happen in churches and so the 7-year Adventist has been out. We go to things court and we have our banners. But I told them that call to action and services are there. So when I got your email, because I was in the summit where there was convoy and confusion, I followed that and I asked people within the church to it. So for me to be here is because of the interest that I've been having solo. But better than we need to talk about the way forward to the strategy. We've got too many organizations, NPCs and NPOs that exist of women. And in this organization, our government is doing the same thing. So my take right now is that if the bill gets to NCOP and is passed, civil society would have and end this fighting. And as Kelly said, before the 2020, it was 5 women killed. Today we are sitting, I don't know why it says 11, because I'm sitting with 20 women that are killed daily by their lovers and families. So why then don't we change the whole plan? Because if there's so much, even the state lawyer is misrepresenting, and there won't be a winning fight between now and the passing of the bill and the elections of 2024, to make the civil society, all the committees, because I'm very active in Zola, in those committees, to have a fee to fund ourselves so that we can appoint and go to High Court and object in a right way than to object in corners. Without us, if I have an interest in it and put out money and approach people that all the women that have suffered and have one person contributing 100 and some thousand rand so that we can have a voice. Because right now, to want to have a funded within government departments, they've misled the whole process. And it's not going to go back after the bill has been passed. So I'm just thinking aloud because of frustration that I have been in different corners, in different women organizations, in different women that are owning companies running projects, and our government says 40% and it's not implemented. It's somebody's mouth, it's a political a state or public announcement, and it ends there. It's not trickling down to Section 76, Section 7. Nothing is happening in this country. Nothing, not only for civil society, nothing. We're running companies, I mean, the spectrum space, nothing is happening. Presidents meet you, after that, they leave you hanging for another 6 months, and in that 6 months, your business is not running.
Okay, thank you. I think you taking us towards the end of this conversation. We had asked for 90 minutes of the time. We plan to have another conversation, which is different from this one, but plenty, because that's the working. We are where we are, so we have stated what has happened since May of 2022 until now, the 1st of November, our celebration and anniversary. We have this bill that may become law, and substance of this bill is not what we asked for, is not what we had said we want from the summit. Our submissions were not taken on board. They are proceeding the way that they wanted to proceed. So the question really is, there isn't anything that we have said that they have given, right? We have been in this process with them. We went to the summit with them. We shared our submission, as we said. We engaged in the drafting of the report, like some people here engaged. We are still saying the same thing. We can choose to continue talking to people who won't hear us, or we can choose to disengage. And when we do disengage, we must do it very loudly, so that they know that this is where we are. So maybe the response that we wanted to be amplified did not happen at the summit, but we can amplify our displeasure, right? We have a responsibility to fast track the NSP, because, like we say, this is our NSP, you know. Government may have the resources, but we need to find resources to make sure that we hold to account the people who said they were going to coordinate the response, you know, and they said they were going to lead the response, because this is not what they are doing in the country now, right? They promised us prevention services. That's what we're talking about in Pillar 2, right? Pillar 3, that's the criminal justice, you know, response. We can go on and on and on and on about the things that they owe us under the Constitution, under the NSP that clearly specifies what it is that they need to do for us. That has not happened. We are sitting here 3.5 years since the NSP came into being. We are left with 6.5 years. This is a 10-year plan where we committed to 10 things around. So we are promising that the same channels that gave you the invite to come here and hear what has happened, in the next couple of weeks, we are going to come back. We are not going to have a response about how we do everything else, but the things that we think are important, especially the issue of funding, how we resource the response, it's some of the things that we are going to take forward. You know, we came here as the PSPC or the ex-PSPC. We come from different kind of formations, but our idea is that as civil society, we do need to work together. So we are going to be reaching out to different civil society formations to say, now that we are where we are, how do we move, forward? But we cannot be the victims all the time and tell a story of an unresponsive partner. What we wanted to say was our hopes when we went into this process. We were not naive. We know how government operates, but it doesn't have one day to say, let me trust this process. But people are now saying, does this process know you are trusting it? So, what we are promising, and I think, as we come to the end, I don't know, Simone, if there are more comments, but what we are promising.
There is.
Okay.
Sibulelo is unable to, they're unable to raise their hand, and but they'd like to speak.
Okay.
So if we have time. Sibulelo, please.
I saw something that should be covered, but the last.
Oh, yeah, they say they've been covered. All right.
So, if there is, no other comments. And if there is no other
We were being asked for the summary report on the chat, but as we had stated, we don't have it.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, we have not seen the report. I think the only person that has
It's
seen the
me.
report is Kundile.
right, because I needed to
And the
sign on.
others.
And this has been like, I think this was in August or September. And so what I can do, because it's government's report, right? We were part of the process. I already have problems with the other governments. So, what I can undertake to do is to go back and say, can we release this? Because maybe they are waiting for kind of pomp and ceremony, but I can assure you that the report actually exists. The idea way back then was that March 21 or 22nd April, these were the public holidays where there was going to be like a public thing where this is handed over to the president. But we don't need that. It's insane that a year later we still don't have a report for whatever it is that we are waiting for. But there is no reason not to have this report. So what we can do is when we communicate next, we can actually say, but it's nothing for me to call the presidency and actually say civil society people are asking when, like, why can't we just release the report? That's all there is to it. There doesn't have to be any kind of ceremony.
Yeah, ceremony. There might be ceremony.
Yes, for the report. It's late already. So let's just release it.
But thank you for giving us the opportunity to serve. Thank you very much.
Thank you for trusting us. All right.
Thank you.
What does it mean? What do you mean by that? We are trusted to serve. We are still serving. It's just that you are disbanded by the unruly. So you can't say you're disbanded because this is.
We are just.
Yeah, technically.
But we all have a vested interest in developing a strategy as civil society. So we are still going to be a part of that process. Yes. But we don't have an official capacity as former representatives of the PSBC. So that's the part we clarify.
Yeah.
I mean, the power of being there was that we had oversight.
Yeah.
And we could go in there and say to the various government departments, where is this? This is what you promised, and when is it happening? We no longer have power after we were disbanded. So we can't have meetings and actually ask these questions. So it is all in their hands. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us. Until next time. Thank you. Bye.
Those who didn't manage to sign the register, stay at the back.
Thank you all for coming.
But I knew because they told me of everyone that's
Yes. Yes, yes, yes,
So you
yes,
can
yes.
sort of-
As soon as we go and. So we'll get you, how did you find that about it?
I can.